afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us here for a session on exploring AI in design and construction. Very interesting topic of the day, and I think you heard a lot about AI and its different roles and pathways within each of the companies that we had up here today already. We'll try to take it in a little bit of a different approach this time, just to keep it a little bit lively. As many of you know, my name is Greene. I'm the VP of Strategy, Analytics, and Knowledge at NFP. For about 10 years, I've spent a lot of my time focused on construction and infrastructure technology, innovation, and much of my week is actually spent meeting with startup technologies in the construction and infrastructure space. And I've been lucky enough to try to figure out from the insurance side of things. As a broker at NFP, we are really in a good position in the middle of the clients, which are our largest contractor companies, and the insurance side, because we see the claims. We learn a lot about what's going wrong in the industry. And from there, it's really an easy way to determine how we match problems with the solutions out there. So that's why I spend most of my time talking with the construction technology companies. And at sessions like these, I really learn a lot continuously about what solutions are out there. So we look at it from the perspective of reducing total cost of risk. That's why we started our technology alliance at NFP, where we're focused on, from the scope of the project, from the very start, the design, pre-construction, construction, and even into the ownership, how do you reduce risk and how do you focus on your T-core and measure that so you can have a measurement of your mitigation delta from your frequency and your severity of losses with the solutions that we're seeing out there. So we really see the problems and match them with the solutions. And that's why we have an interesting perspective on this. And I feel that AI is truly in its infancy, and some people think that we live in a simulation right now, right? If you're one of those people, maybe you're in this room today, but we really have 5 different parts of AI when we think about it. That's learning, reasoning, problem solving, perception, and language. It's not some miracle genie that's going to solve all our problems, but I think as we kind of take slow steps forward to chip away at what problems it can actually solve in design and construction, then eventually we'll get to the point where a lot of people think of what it is already. But joining me today in this panel, we have some of the most knowledgeable individuals in the sector. And it's a good mix of design and construction professionals. On my left, we have Markku, Allison. Markku, you mentioned that ever since you were 6 years old, you wanted to be an architect, right? So now you're the Vice President in Strategy of Innovation at Chandos Construction. Markku is an award-winning designer with over 35 years of experience. He is a prominent thought leader on design and construction in the industry and transforms issues and heads up Chandos' innovation initiatives. Then we have Scott Wolslager, Senior Engagement Manager at IMAGINiT Technologies. Scott's team is responsible for strategy development and defining the scope and deliverables for professional services for IMAGINiT's AEC and manufacturing clients. Then we have George Ikonomakis, Senior Manager of Integrated Construction Technology at PCL. George brings more than 2 decades of project management experience in the AEC industry with a particular focus on digital technology and implementation. And last but not least, Sean Robbins. Sean is a BIM manager and associate at Moriyama Teshima Architects. Sean is a dedicated design professional and instructor who explores the potential of building information models, the technologies it interfaces with, and the people who bring it to life. This esteemed panel will provide some really valuable experience and insights from their own companies. And I'd like to start off the conversation with experiences. We'll get into the challenges of the industry, talk about the benefits, and then look into the future landscape of where AI is going in construction and infrastructure and design. So first thing, we'll talk about some of your personal experiences. Markku, with over 35 years of experience in innovation, how have you seen AI transform design and construction at Chandos?
I would say relatively little so far. We're probably on a leading edge of technology adoption spectrum, but in terms of AI specifically, it's such a narrow range of the field, and we're so new to it. I mean, the industry is so new to it. I don't think we've seen lots of significant benefits. We've run a lot of experiments. Probably our best ones have been around information extraction. We've done some interesting stuff with early lead detection for our business development folks. We're doing some interesting work around coaching using AI, and just starting to do some stuff in the field. But in terms of its integration into our day-to-day work and impact in that realm, I'd say AI specifically relatively small. The rest of the technology spectrum, much, much greater, but AI specifically relatively small. And I was recently at the Center for Integrated Facility Engineering, or CIFE, down at Stanford. They have their summer program every year, and a couple of colleagues and I were down there. And I don't feel too bad about saying that we've seen relatively little. This is most of the leading construction companies in the Bay Area. And the real takeaway that we got from CIFE was, AI is coming, it's coming fast, but nobody really knows what it looks like. And everyone is basically trying lots of different things and looking at lots of different experiments.
And I would say even the large digital data companies like Google, Amazon, they don't even really have a clear picture of where they're going and where it could be. They do a lot of different things, but that's not to say that it shouldn't have any other impact on our industry, because we're all trying to figure this out together.
Yeah.
You mentioned coaching for AI. What does that entail?
So that's basically it's a startup that's doing this thing where you basically have somebody sit down and work through potential cultural scenarios, and based on your responses and interactions to the proposed scenario, it'll give you feedback about how you might change your behavior or how you might change your approach to this person. We do a lot of collaborative delivery, and so interpersonal relationships and that kind of stuff becomes really significant. Mm-hmm. So the coaching piece, having people understand better how they might act or interact with other people, can be really useful.
Interesting. Let's skip over to George. George, how has PCL's integrated technologies and the team leveraged digital technology and AI to enhance its project management?
Yeah, so with PCL, as Markku said, it's and what you've heard from previous AI panels, it's still in its flourishing. So we have tested the waters. We have this one program that we're able to analyze the specs. Then they're able to group the information that we're looking for and criteria as there are, and bring the specs into sort of I'm going to say a single fact sheet, but it's not really a single sheet. But basically, instead of reading the documents throughout, it sort of organizes the information in with specific, requests in mind. Earlier in the previous panel of the AI, there was a gentleman that had the RTFC, read the F contract. We still believe in that, and we still got to do that. But when it comes to the digital technology on the field, our solar team has actually started bringing in AI. And the way we've done that is, in a solar project, such a huge land mass that they got to manage. And during the construction, they want to see the progress of the installations of the panels. So instead of having and depending on the sequences, if you're starting it from left to right, which is usually not that easy, that simple, it's usually scattered. We're using drones to fly over the sites. And then from the drone information, we're putting it into an AI platform that we have partnered with. And they've created an algorithm to see the progress of those panels. They're able to identify what that is, and we're able to see it. My mind is going on how can we take that on a building, and can we do something similar? Drones could be used in that manner, maybe while we're doing the structural, but as soon as the envelope comes in and closes, what do we do then? And so these are ideas that we're pondering over and seeing where the technology is. But so far we've been using on the solar side, where it's a little more vast.
It's good that you have a clear case that you need an answer, and you're using AI to actually help you build a decision-making model, right? To make a different decision, a better decision, or a safer decision.
Well, it also saves on resources, right? I mean, having somebody walk in the site. I mean, you fly the drone. It's taking 20 minutes, 30 minutes, you get all the information you need opposed
Yeah.
to just walking around.
Labor is obviously a huge topic of concern
Sure.
in every conference I've seen in the past few years, but we'll touch on that when we talk about the challenges. Scott, how has your team at IMAGINiT Technologies strategized to provide competitive advantages through technology and software development in construction?
It's a great question. So we spend a lot of time talking to our customers, trying to understand problems that they have that we can help solve with technology and software development. And it's probably the most significant area that we're using AI in our organization for our purposes is software development purposes. Microsoft's Copilot is something that we're testing pretty extensively to help us write code and write code faster. And rapid application development possibilities is potentially huge gains, like George was talking about, drones flying things, recognizing that there's a solar panel there, tagging it appropriately. All those technologies are kind of low-hanging fruit that we're looking for and ideas from our customers of how to automate things and how can we automate Revit data extraction using artificial intelligence. How does it quantify information out of that Revit model or that Navisworks model or that Inventor model? And many businesses, and you all know this in the construction industry, utility industry is ripe for automation and designing and building faster. And offsite fabrication obviously is important, and AI can help make decisions as what to fabricate offsite versus what not to fabricate offsite.
Mm-hmm. And you still need intelligent people behind that AI, right? I mean, that's
it's great. I think some people think that AI is going to take over software development, but it's probably never will get to that point. Somebody still needs to architect a solution. It's like somebody designs a building. It's the same thing in software development world. Is you have to design a software application. It has to be put together in a logical manner that can expand, so you don't have to redo everything. Rework is a killer in the software development world. You got to redo something. You just wasted months and months and months of development time and resource time. It's no different in the software development world as in the construction world.
Yeah. Sean, question for you. Could you describe your experiences with BIM and other AI technologies at Moriyama Teshima Architects, and how have they changed the architectural landscape?
Yeah, well, first of all, you forgot to mention big nerd in all of our intro. So yeah, we're big nerds, but for us, we have many irons in the fire when it comes to these tools, because we're still trying to figure out how AI best serves us as architects. So far, the ones that we're kind of leveraging the most, I would say, have to do with the actual design aspect of the process. So we're using things like Midjourney AI, which is very kind of a geeky platform where you have to, for those that have kids, they're probably on the Discord chat room in which it runs. But it's a very interesting tool because it forces you to generate prompts that kind of are like generating a thesis. So you get more and more close to what it is you're trying to convey, and whether or not the imagery does convey that is a whole other thing. We still have to, use actual intelligence to edit that. We're also using things like Chrome AI, which is kind of a sketch. You can do a hand sketch to a rendering type of thing. And in the case of BIM, we're using Verus, which is it's a kind of a rendering iteration thing, similar to something like Midjourney, but it's taking your initial geometry and then rendering it in various different styles that you're prompting it to do. So that's a very interesting one for us because we spend a lot of time doing precedent research and kind of garnering all of this research, so to speak, from various precedents. What to do, what not to do comes out of the process. And then maybe the last one that's just kind of more on the end of the process is something called Swap AI, which I believe is running out of Tel Aviv, Israel right now. We had some meetings with them. And very interestingly, they're taking data in and generating BIM models and the drawings to boot with that. However, it's still kind of geared towards multi-story residential and K through 12 schools. So it's a bit out of our particular wheelhouse in institutional cultural buildings, but we have our eye on that because really at the end of the day, right, the GPT, the P, is pre-trained. And once we start to get that data set and the machines are learning off that data set, then we see some very huge potential in this as a kind of an assistant to the design process and eventually the documentation process.
Yeah, it sounds like you're spending a lot of time on the prompt itself, right? Working with Midjourney, and is that a level all on its own to learn how to properly associate with
Yeah,
these,
it's like
languages?
it's like writing poetry, really bad poetry, you could say, where you're trying to, evoke an image through the words that you're putting in there, and it's kind of maybe poetry meets code, in some kind of linguistic fashion. But to qualify it, we're not saying we accept what it gives us. We're still saying, okay, what does this tell us about ourselves? Maybe what questions we're asking, or how does it, transgress rules entirely that we wouldn't have thought about, right? Something comes at you through the chaos modifier in something like Midjourney, and you think, oh wow, that's a really interesting thing that we wasn't on our radar initially.
Yeah, I think there's two parts. That is, what questions can we come up with that will give us interesting responses, but then what can the patterns and the data tell us that is a surprise to us that we can keep learning? So let's talk about some of the challenges in this space with AI in design and construction. I'll try to cover 3 topics. I'm not sure if we'll have time for everything, but obviously the labor shortage, right? You hear that over and over again. You've heard it today multiple times. We'll try to cover data security, kind of big brother surveillance, and built-in bias in AI, as well as liability issues. So my first question around labor, and actually Tim from Chandos brought this up. Giovanni brought this up from the OGCA. It's a number 1 issue right now that we're all facing. So I'll throw this out to all the panelists here. How do you address concerns that AI may displace jobs in the construction industry, and how do you see it as a tool to help fill the labor gaps on the flip side?
Personally, I think it's a cultural change that we got to look at first. Technology has always been a threat, no matter how much we've looked at it 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. I remember once upon a time, AutoCAD was a threat to my manual drafting days, right? And here we are today. So I think the fear is always going to be there. I like what Sean just said earlier, and I don't know how many people caught it because it was a keyword for me. It should be assisting the process, not taking over the process. And by using technology, tapping into the young folks today, who we heard the challenge, they're going into university, but they're not thinking of the trades. And I think there's a good core out there that everyone's in technology now. And if we could promote how technology is being brought into construction or design, I think we could tap in a world that those young folks don't know that it is there for them. But at the same token, the experience of design and construction is going to be their challenge. So how do you marry the two? And I think I think it was brought up earlier today, if I'm not mistaken, is there's a sort of bidirectional. Mentoring used to be the senior person mentoring the young. And I think right now we're seeing that their mentorship could go both ways, but in different realms. Technology versus boots in the ground versus the experience. So, and I think the culture needs to shift and understand that we can learn from each other. I don't see technology as a challenge. I see the culture as a challenge.
I totally agree with that. I think it's a cultural issue more than anything. And I think a lot of it comes down to being thoughtful and asking the right questions as we move into this period of change. And I was looking back the other day at predictions from McKinsey and those kinds of characters from like 2016, 2017, and I was kind of surprised. I thought that this was what I remembered, and I went back and I looked, and it was. But their early predictions were that automation and AI was coming. It was going to have a more significant impact on like the trades side of things than it was on the creative side of things, the design side of things. Trades were up here, designers were down here, and that has played out completely reverse, right? And now the predictions are obviously the opposite. And when we think about the work in design and construction, which sectors are going to get hit first? So it's probably based on everything that I'm seeing. It's like design professions are actually being impacted more swiftly than the trades in a lot of ways. Within the construction firm itself, the professional side, the office jobs, are going to have more of an impact than the field jobs. But how do we make sure that there is that we consider what kind of opportunities those changes will create? I think it's really about being thoughtful and asking the right questions.
Yeah.
I think Jeff mentioned it this morning on the labor statistic. I forget the number, but I think he said 35% of the time is productive or something like that, or 40%. Yeah. I think that number is going to change drastically. And the way that it's going to change is, I believe that artificial intelligence is going to become more invisible to the tradespeople on the job site. I think back 30 years ago when I started, and one of the first projects I worked on, and walking around with a big roll of paper and all the problems that we had on that project, and really we didn't document anything 30 years ago. Today, the field reporting requirements are far different than they were 30 years ago, and a lot of people spend time filling out forms, capturing data that really could be captured in the background. To George's point, scanning the site. Somebody doesn't have to sit and try to work with their work gloves and iPhones and try to enter in all this data. That stuff should all go away, and it should just be natural. It should be more of a natural installation process, and it's capturing that data as you're doing it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It should be, and you're testing Microsoft Copilot, like you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is an assistant, and it's something that if you don't have that assistant, it's going to give you a competitive disadvantage. I think in the future content that we see.
One of my customers I was talking to earlier today, he used a good analogy. I thought he called it, a very smart intern. Mm-hmm. And what you have to do with an intern, you still have to quality check their work, right? You have to make sure that it's right before you send it to somebody. But that intern, you got to use that intern, and you got to leverage it. And the more you know how to leverage it, the better, more efficient you will be.
So reporting should be a byproduct of the work, not
Yep.
a
Not
task in
activity.
itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're seeing that in the especially in the photo capture and reality capture world that exists, and the intelligence that we're getting from that data and the recognition of things. It's here.
So I'd like to move on to the next topic around, data security, Big Brother surveillance, and maybe some bias built into AI, because we haven't figured out everything. There are some people that may gain control over AI, and we don't really know how it's going to evolve in the future. But it is a question worth asking: what ethical considerations are vital when using AI for monitoring workers, and how do you deal with potential biases in AI-driven decision making?
I'll jump into that. I think it's important to qualify again the fact that we're not talking artificial general intelligence. What a lot of what we're talking about is machine learning. Again, going back to the pre-trained idea of GPT. So it really is contingent upon the data that we're putting into these systems in terms of what we're getting out of it. But it does represent an issue, because if you're scraping the entire internet, anyone that's been on the internet knows that it's an absolute mess right out there, and it's truth, it's untruth, and whatever else. So if that is your data set, then it's very hard for you to actually assess reliably what kind of output you're getting. But if we can start to design the inputs so that we are assured in a sense of what those outputs are going to be, I think there could be quite a powerful aspect to that process. And yeah, maybe I'll just pass it over here.
I would look at it on a contractor side. One of the things that we keep on hearing about AI is the safety point of it, how you can increase the safety on site with the workers. In a previous, they were talking about having with the wearables. You got to think of ethics right away, right? It's the ethical part of being tracked. I don't know. I've lost 2 friends through having a disagreement with COVID, meaning lost friends, not because they passed away, it's just friendship. Because the theory was that, the vaccine was going to monitor me. And I said, if that's truly your fear, then take your phone and throw it away, drop the internet, right? Get the old cars that don't have the technology it has today, because you're being monitored 24/7 because of what we use. So the wearables, the ethical part is still there, but it increases when you start bringing it into workplace, not on the leisure side. On the leisure side, we're comfortable with it. But when it comes to, we introduce it into work, all of a sudden there's the unions, there are a lot of things that come into play that you got to take in consideration, which is valid. But the information, to your point, is the information that I want to extract from that has to be transparent to everybody of what you're looking to get out of. Maybe it's not the heart rate that you want to see when you're on the safety, because I'm a short fuse type of person and my heart rate's going all the time because I'm always frustrated. But it's more about the activities that you're doing, or how long the activities are, the temperature that's being, in your job site. If it's getting to a point where the temperature is getting too hot, well, we need to relocate the team or something like that. But I think on the ethical side is exactly what you were saying, Sean. The information I want to get out. I know you're sort of referring to the design, but on the resources, the same thing as people, right? What do you want to get out from them as well? So I think that's a big challenge.
Yeah, that's a fair choice. I've talked to unions in the past, and at the end of the day, we want to reduce the risk, increase the safety,
Correct.
and make them go home to their families safe and sound each and every night. And I think those are the inputs and outputs that we're looking for. We're not looking for personal information, or it's just about the project health. And I think
You said a key word is transparent. If you tell people what you're doing and why you're doing it, it makes sense to them sometimes. And obviously, you're going to have some resistance out there, but I mean, if you're transparent about it, it's critical.
There has to be lessons we can learn from other industries too, like the medical fields, right? There have been so many studies done about movement of workers in a hospital, how many steps the nurses have to make. This comes out a lot in the design side, that there's lots of research about that. People have dealt with these kinds of tracking issues before, RFID tags, blah, blah, all that stuff. There are places we can go to see how people have solved this problem in the past.
Yeah, and like George said, we're getting monitored anyways in our daily lives. It's not at the forefront of our head all the time. I think just in the interest of time, we'll skip to some of the benefits. So I pose a question to all of you guys. What are some of the standout benefits that you've experienced personally by implementing AI in design or construction? And how has that impacted efficiency, safety, or innovation?
I'll toss one out that we did recently that was a real win for us. And this probably lands more in the machine learning side than AI, but as we start to tackle our net zero carbon commitment by 2040, trying to figure out a path there. Part of that starts with calculating all of our internal emissions and that kind of thing. And with tracking that information comes massive numbers of invoices, whether it's around concrete or steel or this or that. And our sustainability lead was trying to figure out, how do I capture the carbon contribution of this particular vendor? I have this stack of 1,700 invoices. They don't have the ability to just give me the information in a database, so I actually have to deal with these. And so using Power Automate, which is a Microsoft thing, she was able to just pre-train with a set of 5 or 10 invoices. These are the fields of information that we need to get, and push go. And 5 minutes later, we have a nicely formatted database, 1,700 invoices that she could do in 20 minutes instead of like a month worth of work.
Yeah, just something simple, but something impactful.
Right, exactly, yeah.
I would say maybe there's three points I've been thinking about. Hopefully I can remember them all as I'm talking here. The first would be the grunt work I see on the horizon, that could be severely, or let's say very much reduced in a good way, where it frees us up to start thinking about the details, the things that are kind of the governing drawings of a set, as opposed to maybe the overall cartoon set of drawings itself, when we're kind of creating that. The other is that I think there's potential, and I hope there's potential, that the tools start to be given to the users in such a way that they can curate and design them, rather than the black box AI that we're dealing with now, which, going back to the ethics thing, we have no idea who's listening to our data and how it's being sold or repurposed or whatever it is. We have no idea. And I think it would be very interesting to have tools that architects and anyone in the construction industry can make that tool themselves and have that be part of their business model, rather than necessarily relying on a kit of parts or various products. I think that customization is really interesting. And the third point, I already forgot what it was. But
Actually, on your second point, it made me think of, when we saw the slide up there that said 300,000 Canadians are retiring each and every year, there's a lot of intellectual property knowledge retiring as well, right? So someone working at like an architecture firm using AI, like, is that going to make new people not really learn because they're just going to be told what to do? And how do we like bring in all the insight and knowledge from the senior people into your younger people, right? It reminds me of like driving a self-driving car, right? Is the next generation not going to be know how to drive because it's all going to be self-driving cars? Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, that's definitely a concern we have, right? Is once you start doing this recursion model over and over, you just start smelling your own, and you have this kind of creative atrophy or an idea atrophy, or you're just doing the same thing over and over, and progress really doesn't look the same anymore because it's just recycled data over and over again. So that is a concern. Still forget my third point.
There is such thing as too many options sometimes too, right? AI. AI can generate you a million options. Well, how do you narrow down your choice now? It can be too much.
Absolutely. So the third point is a critical one, is optimization. I think this is going to be a huge one for us. If we're doing, complex curves, an AI could generate us the rationalization of that curve in the most efficient way, whether it's cost or constructability. So there's just a whole vertical of, exploration that could be done with that, just the buildability and constructability with AI as that assistant.
So I'll take a step back on the AI for a second. How long has AI been around, depending on how you define AI? Right? Structural engineers used to use pad and paper and calculations to try and figure out the buildings, but now they have these softwares that are just spitting out the information for them. They just put in the information they need, and it spits out this structure that tells you that it's going to be sound or it's not. But it's the structural engineer's experience that when they review that, they'll make that determination and start tweaking. Let's talk about autocorrect. How many times have you started texting, right? And all of a sudden you send it and you read it, and some of the words there make no sense because it picked up a different word that you were texting so fast you didn't pick it up, and it's a whole different meaning on your sentence. So depending on how you want to define AI, I think it's been around. I think the challenge is us, is taking that step back, and as I'm texting before I send it, maybe I should read it over, just depending on it. And it goes back to what you said earlier, Sean, about assistance, right? It's just assist us, it shouldn't take over. And where you capture that experience, that's always been a sort of $1 billion question, right?
Yeah, I think we're not going to have a big aha moment tomorrow or next week or in a year even. I think we're slowly going to start to realize AI is assisting us and it's incorporated in our lives, and we're not going to realize it at the same time. If you ask the question, how long has technology been around? A caveman that, made a hammer, that's technology, right? It's been around for a long time. I think the same kind of goes for AI. We just don't really understand that we've been using it in our daily lives for a long time. It's just going to keep evolving. And as I said, I do think it's very much in its infancy right now.
We're in the dot-com boom of AI, really. It's the 1990s, but it's all about AI, and there's lots of applications. And to Sean's point earlier, who do you trust with your data? Who are you giving your data to? Some things to consider.
Is it you, Scott?
Could be.
But yeah, we still conceive of these as tools. Like, it's easy to go down that hole of doom and gloom and everyone's job is going to be taken. As a BIM manager, I still don't know what my job really is. Maybe you can, you know what I'm talking about. It's this weird kind of constantly evolving position, albeit orbiting around still the same process of architecture, construction, and everything else. And so we're less concerned about jobs disappearing as so much as they are going to be evolving with some of the tools, like people like Scott are producing for us. We're still conceptually thinking of them as a tool, as something that's an assistant to us. We're picking up our surfboards and we're riding this wave. We're not sitting here like afraid of being drowned by it. We're kind of excited about a lot of these potentials that have kind of dogged us for years in this industry. There's a lot of room for efficiencies and optimizations and the like.
So just real quick, we only have a couple more minutes left, but let's talk about the future landscape. Markku, what would 6-year-old Markku think about where we're at today, and where do you think about where we're going to be tomorrow?
Well, it's certainly a different world than when I started out, especially with the proliferation of tools and choices that are available now. I think where things are going, I think of it, it's mostly probably a continuation of sort of the iteration and ability to simulate will allow us to make more informed decisions faster, sooner.
Yeah.
So that kind of cycle is something that in the past in design, we mostly did that in our heads, but now we also have digital assistants that can help us see those things more clearly, and we'll be able to apply those to a much broader range of things than just design iteration. It can be around strategy, it can be around potential future outcomes for the world, it can be around anything.
Any other thoughts on the future of the industry?
I believe that I'm waiting for that redundancy to walk away. I'm waiting for this new technology as it evolves, that we're going to stay away from a lot of what you would describe the grunt work, and really focus on the tasks at hand in front of us with efficiencies and sustainability, and looking for better methods to deliver a project opposed to dealing with just tedious tasks. And I think AI can assist in that. I really do. I'm excited to see where it goes, but I'm also worried that, to the point of my text messaging earlier, I hope it doesn't make us dumber. That's my fear, because we're dependent on it. So my ideal world is that, Sean, you got a great point in saying, can you give us something that we can control, so we can deliver it the way we want to deliver it through our experiences, taking advantage of the senior person.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you guys. I think we're out of time here, but just to conclude, some of the key points I heard was AI is in the infancy. We need to teach our own clients and colleagues how to use AI. Figure out what inputs and outputs do we actually need for a decision-making tool. We're using AI as an assistant, and we're optimizing efficiency. So all very positive things, but thank you, gentlemen, for joining me up here today, and I hope everyone enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.